Hey everyone, today I wanted to go through my lighting process and post-processing process in Unity 5. On Monday, I will be uploading a video of my process within Unreal Engine 4 using the exact same scene. So you guys can see my process for Unity and Unreal, and then you can compare the results, as a lot of people wanted to see my process and a lot of people wanted a comparison. After my video on Monday, I will do a comparison video. Before we begin, I want to show you where this came from. Glenn is an awesome artist, and he made the Tiki Tiki Treasure boat, which is awesome. And upon looking at his website, he's worked on a bunch of AAA games, indie games, and his own awesome environments. So I'm not sure if Glenn's available for contract work or anything, but go seek him out, because if you have a look here, he's done amazing models and amazing textures, and he has so much experience. So thanks, Glenn, for making your boats a public model that we could download and mess around with. Now, back into Unity, and sorry, my voice is a little raspy, I'm a bit sick at the moment, so hopefully I don't cough too much in this video, but back into Unity, there are a few things I like to set up straight away, and before we begin, I just wanted to show you, if you do download this scene, you'll notice a lot of the materials have a smoothness value and have gray brightness. You'll notice that it washes out the color, so just make sure to make that white and turn the smoothness down, or if you want a cool effect, you can turn the smoothness up depending on what materials you want. Let's begin by going through what I like to do first in Unity. First of all, usually I just replace the skybox with another skybox I have, but in this case we have a sky dome provided by Glenn. So what we're going to do is disable the skybox, and then we're going to change, so before that was on color, on skybox by default, go change that to color, and we want to change the ambient color. And let me show you why. If I was to go to something more warm, like the sun color, yellow, and then I was to drag it over, you can see that it's affecting the colors in the scene. And a lot of the time, a lot of people don't mess around with this. You need to change this light color first of all. So let's change the ambient color, and you can do a lot of cool things. But for what I want to do something like this yellow, which I believe makes the scene color look really nice. The next thing you want to do is with your directional light, I've already positioned this, but you'll notice probably when you started it might have been something like this. And the problem with this color, this direction, is all the shadows are covering the boat. So what you want to do is position it in a way where you can clearly see the focal point, which is this boat, and the shadow information is where you want it, which is, I want something like this. The other thing you can do is change the directional light color, which will affect the color of the light, color of the objects that the light is hitting directly. So you can make it warmer, but I'm quite happy with where it is now. The next thing we want to do is you want to go to Assets, Import, and import the effects. I've already done this. So if I go to my main camera, I've already got all these image effects here, which I'm going to walk through one by one. If you want to know how to access these after importing them, you go to Add Component and click on Image Effects. So just to show that really quickly, go to Assets, Import Package, and click on Effects. It will decompress the package and load up all your options. Now, I've already imported it, but you'll get a bunch of options. There'll be just an OK button. It will import it all for you. And here are all my settings. I'm going to show you how I modify them and what I do. So the first one I like to use is anti-aliasing. And you'll notice it gets rid of it makes all the lines really sharp and gets rid of all that pixelation around the outside. This is the first thing I do, and I don't mess around with any of the settings. The second thing I like to do is screen space ambient occlusion. This is an amazing effect which adds extra shadow information. The only problem is, sometimes if you're running, say, a mobile game, it can cause a lot of draw calls, which you can see up here, set pass calls. This effect is not great on mobile. It cannot run in real time. It will lag your game. Even on some desktop games, it's not recommended. Unfortunately, the SSAO in Unity isn't highly optimized, but it is a brilliant effect. The next effect I like to use is bloom. And bloom really adds a lot of it really lightens up the scene quite a bit. Now you may want to adjust your bloom settings quite a bit, different intensities and stuff like that. And if you do export a game with bloom, make sure people can disable it, because a lot of people do not like the bloom setting, but a lot of people do like the bloom setting. You can mess around with the intensity to make it more intense, and the threshold, so it doesn't see here how it's close to the clouds. If you want it to really reach out and affect more of the sky or more of the objects around it, you can turn down the threshold. But if you want to control the radius it is around objects, make sure you keep the threshold higher. Vignette and chromatic aberration is an effect I like to use to blur the corners. So if I turn this all the way up, you'll notice it's entirely blurred. But if I just blur it a bit, it blurs the corners, which is a really nice effect. Alternatively, you could use a depth of field effect. But for YouTube, I like to use this effect because it's simple and easy to put on, and it saves a lot of time. Sun shafts is another great effect I like to use, and you'll notice the effect straight away. It's pretty much like volumetric lighting. It's adding light and pointing it at the camera. The way you set this up is where you see shafts caster, you need to have something in the scene, an empty game object, a game object, any type of game object. You need to put that into the shafts caster, like my directional light. After you do that, you need to position the object that is going to cast all the sun shafts in front of the camera. And as you can see here, depending on where I move it, it affects the direction of them. Same thing for the main camera. And because these two objects need a relationship with each other, if the camera is not looking at the shaft caster, unfortunately all those nice effects will go away. So usually in a game, you will want to put them in a focal point where the player will look. So if we're thinking about this game in a boat, you're coming up into the boat, so you're in a boat yourself and you're coming to the shores. The sun shafts are great there because you're going to get all that nice effect whilst you're moving towards it. The other effect I really like to use is color correction. It brings out the true colors in the scene, in my opinion. If you look at the boat, it looks really nice. And what I did before is I actually messed around with these. You want to mess around with the curves depending on the type of look that you want. I can't tell you the perfect settings. There are no such thing as the perfect settings. Every scene needs a unique combination of lighting and image effects. Now, outside of image effects and lighting, such as my directional light and setting the ambient light, if you don't have great models, such as an artist like Glenn can produce, if you don't have good models, good textures, or good colors, your scene unfortunately won't look very nice. There is one other factor that will play a massive part in how good your Unity scene can look. This factor is the shader you use. Let me give you an example. We're using the standard shader, which is quite nice. You have things like this, the smoothness, which can have a really nice effect here. You should be playing around with all of this stuff. You'll also notice you have something toon, like the toon shader. You can write your own shaders, by the way, but let's have a look at the toon. If I go to lit, see how it gives me this cartoony type effect. So standard, toon, lit. You may want this type of effect instead of what you have. You really need to play around with the type of effect you have and the shaders you use. So in this case, let's say I turn that up all the way there. The octopus looks a lot more interesting. And so does that there, that object there. But you may not want everything to be reflective. There is so much to play around with in terms of making a scene look good. And it really is, it's a mix of getting the correct lighting, the correct post-processing, the correct ambient lighting, the correct shaders. It's all a massive mix of this. And I can't really tell you what the best option is because it's going to change depending on what you're making. Now, one other thing I'd like to do, hopefully really quickly, is show you how I'll do this scene for nighttime. Best way to do this is, first of all, we need to change our directional light, and our ambient light color. So, before we begin, let's go into our sky and disable that. The reason why I want to disable it is because I can't really affect the color of the sky. So what I need to do is disable that, go to my main camera, and choose a color that I think is appropriate for nighttime type lighting. So let's say I choose something like that. Next thing we want to do is change the ambient color, sorry about that, and make it something darker. And then you'll notice the directional light is the last thing, keeping the light, the scene lit, and you want some type of nighttime lighting like this. And if you go to the water, legacy shaders, hopefully I can do this. So let's see what we have here. Ah, there we go. I can turn that down, which is really nice. There we go. We have a kind of nighttime looking environment. Just see if I can change this a bit more. There we go. That's nicer. So it's quite dark. What we need to do is add a light in the scene, and luckily we have a light source here, this lamp. So what I'm going to do is add a light and point light. Let's zero this out. All right. So let's add it just in front of this light here, because we're not going to be viewing it from the side, we're going to be viewing it from the front. We're going to turn off on soft shadows or disable them depending on what we want. Let's see how it looks without the shadows first of all. We want the color of the light, which will add a lot more richness to the scene, and we want to increase the range so we can light up a majority of the scene, and you may even want to increase the intensity. And you're allowed to cheat a little bit. I can bring this light out here just to illuminate more of the scene. Okay, let's see what it looks like when I put soft shadows on. It adds realistic shadows to the scene, which looks a lot nicer. And let's bring Control D. That looks quite nice. So this light source up here, the player really can't see anything on this boat down here, so it's kind of like a little trick. They don't have to know about that. If I was to change this back to standard, you see the water looks a little weird. Mainly because of these things here that I can't really affect, unfortunately. That's why I went for the unlit option, but unlit texture doesn't work. So we had to go to legacy, self-illumination, diffuse, and then we just have to turn that down. What would be really nice is to actually have a transparent unlit. But this looks quite dark. Actually, that gives me an idea. Okay, and the other thing as well is the main camera, sun shafts. We need to change these colors around. Actually, for now, let's disable the sun shafts. Bloom. And let's change up the color correction. That's quite nice. So depending on the time of day in the scene, you might have to change quite a bit of what you're playing around with. Now let's see if I can make this light. Oh. So that's the nighttime default look, which is quite nice. And then by adding this light color in, it's quite strong. So as you can tell, it's a lot of messing around and figuring out details until you have something that you like the look of. So maybe some backlighting here. The player can imagine there's like a campfire behind it perhaps. And the last thing missing from the scene is a skybox, which would dramatically change the look of the scene. I could actually try and mess around with this sky dome. Let's go to standard. And let's turn off receive shadows and cast shadows. And let's see how that looks. Yeah, that looks much more interesting. So this is like a kind of nighttime setup. If I was to do this at night, and I'd have some particles kind of flying around the lamp. You could pretty much endlessly tweak this. What I would add in at the end, I'm not sure if I imported these, the particles. I didn't. So what you want to do is just quickly import these particles. And let's get rid of the materials. We're going to create our own particle system. Prefab, scripts, we just want the textures. Oh, I already have the textures, awesome. Okay, so let's create a particle system. And we want the shape of a box. Let's go for like 50 by 50. Whoops. We're just going to make that enormous. And we're going to change the size so they're significantly smaller. Maybe 0.3, 0.2. Cool. Let's do randomized direction, and let's add a color to these, and let's see what textures we have. Actually, we don't want to use a texture. This should be fine. The other thing I like to do is change the size over lifetime. And do a curve like this, so they start off and rise into size and then disappear. And then you could also change the speed, so they're a bit slower. And the emission rate is only that, so let's turn up to 50. That's looking quite nice. A lot of people always wonder why I add these. I just like to. There's no real reason as to why I add them. Alright, let's see what it looks like. So we got that. Now for the nighttime scene, you don't have to use a color correction like this. You might prefer this look here. But I'm just trying to show you that there are so many different options. It's crazy. You can have so many different looks. So that was kind of like how I would do a nighttime look and how I'd do a daytime look. Oh, whoops. What happened at the end there? Did my skybox disappear? Oh, there we go. Alright, so this is the nighttime one. I would add some particles around the light. Of course, to make this a lot more interesting, you could have the water moving. I could make the camera orbit around and stuff like that. I'm going to show you an end preview of both, and that'll be it. So let's have a look at both of them.